Up, everyone? I'm just kind of wait here for a couple minutes before make sure that everybody comes on board. Um, what an absolutely crazy day in DC sports, and I want to discuss it all with you guys for a little bit here. Let me try to find myself a better spot here. Just bang my knee. All right, we'll go with this angle, a little bit funky angle. It's Wednesday evening here in town. Uh, what you know what a nutty day. Some of it interesting, some of it terrible. I did a not I did a two-part podcast today on Last Man Standing, a podcast in which I spoke about. First of all, I was planning to do Logan Paulson join me, and we talked at great length about the new coordinators, how he views the David Blau situation, the Durante Jones hire, what changes could be made on both schemes, which players perhaps benefit from this scheme, and maybe others it's going to hurt a little bit. Does it change how we view, say, a guy like a Bobby Wagner coming back? Things along those lines. Always a great chat with Logan, and we also got into the draft. He was at the Senior Bowl, and we discussed, again, in the context of these new coordinators, what does that change anything for the draft? Perhaps that part will be in on Monday for Mock Draft Monday. So a two-part episode with that, a two-part Logan Paulson uh, episode. So that'll come Monday, the draft part. But Logan Paulson is going to be in part one, and then also in part one, the Wizards. Amid this day, the Wizards traded for Anthony Davis. Yes, the Wizards. They're going to keep tanking the rest of this season because they've got a top eight protected pick to focus on to keep. But for the future, get beyond this year, the Wizards have got added Anthony Davis and Trae Young in the last few weeks. That is crazy on so many fronts, including just that this all started with trading Bradley Beal and Kyle Kuzma, and now 2-3 years later, they ended up with Anthony Davis, Trae Young, and still have a bunch of draft picks going forward. I know people probably look at that trade and think, whoa, wait a minute. The Wizards, this team that's acquiring assets, just traded away 2 first-round picks and 3 seconds for Anthony Davis. What? There's also some other players in the deal, including D'Angelo Russell, but it's Anthony Davis that matters. And I'm here to tell you that don't look at it like that. There's a lot of positives in this trade, and I broke it down with my guy Adam Rubin, who has been with me, of course, several times here on live chats as well as on the podcast. And we went at great length about the Wizards and what this deal means short term, long term, in the overall context of what they've been doing. So Logan Paulson and the Anthony Davis trade in part one. In part two, obviously the real news of the day locally is the end of the Washington Post sports section as we know it. The Post laid off tons of people today in multiple sections, but the sports section got hit very hard. It's not going to exist in the way that we've all known it for our lives. It is surreal. It is crazy. I can't really believe that it's happened. But at the same time, the Post sports section has not been the same that it's been, that it once was when I was growing up here, and many of you as well, with, Kornheiser and Boswell and Wilbon and, you know, others over the years, David Aldridge, Liz Clark, Rachel Nichols moved on, John Feinstein, all these people. And then, of course, there's the people that I've known now that I've been in the industry, and, including a lot of people who are currently on the beat who, unfortunately, today found out they were getting let go, including Tom Shad and Tashawn Reed, who covered the Commanders for them this year. Two of the other people who were let go today, Gene Wong, who had covered college basketball with and other sports during his 37 years, and Jerry Brewer, columnist who moved on to The Athletic recently. Both of them came on the podcast with me to discuss, Gene with the insight on what happened today. Both of them on where everything went wrong for the Post, like what do they make of everything that's gone on, and then what happens now, not just at the Post but locally. What do we make of the fact that the Washington Post is not going to be around to be there. And there were so many times over the years where, the Washington Post is the paper that had the real budget, the sports, the paper of record in this town, and they were often, the ones who would be at a road game for some of these teams. Maybe not so much the Redskins or the Commanders, but for some of the other teams. And now they're not going to be there. What does that mean? So there's a lot here. There's a lot of ramifications that come out of this with the Post. I've talked to some colleagues, I've talked to some other people, and it's really hard to fathom. I mean, again, there's the personal suckiness to this whole thing. Goes without saying, people losing their jobs for reasons that have nothing to do with their performance. And then you have the longer term perspective. What does this mean for local sports? There's a void here. Somebody, I imagine, is going to come in and try to fill that void. But to what end? I think the Athletic is probably going to hire some people from the Post who just got let go, but they can't hire them all. And I don't necessarily know that they'll even hire them for Washington, D.C. sports. They may be hiring them for other matters. The Post in general is a the Athletic is a national outlet. They do have obviously local pockets, as we know. But, you know, one of my laments there and the things I complained about was like, hey, you're asking me as the Commanders reporter effectively to compete with the Washington Post by myself. Obviously, David Aldridge is there and does a great job as a columnist. I thought David was the best columnist in town at the time I was at the Athletic. But he's also covers the NBA. He isn't just about DC sports. He is Mr. DC, but he isn't just about DC sports. There is somebody who covers the Wizards, as well as the NBA. But you know, not let's just say there wasn't it wasn't breaking through from like a local perspective here in terms of like getting attention. Obviously, Nikki Javala is now on the Commander's beat. She does a fine job, but again, she's one person. So like, I don't. It used to bother me that like, hey, I need some more help here. Plus, like my editors I had over the years, at various times I had editors that lived in Kansas, Seattle, and Virginia Beach. I never had a local editor until Dan Steinberg. Well, he was there after I moved on. Dan Steinberg came over from the Post and he's working with Nikki. That's a great step. Where was that? Well, I wanted that step. I wanted somebody local to be here. And now, if they bring in other people, I would be happy for the individual. I would be pissed off as somebody that used to work there and used to say, "Hey, we need more help." But I don't know that they're going to bring in more help to cover DC sports because the belief was that obviously DC sports there was just not enough of a market. As we all understand, this is a transient city, transient area. People like me and Adam and many of you grew up here. So for us, this is home. These are the teams that we care about. But a lot of others, they come in here with their own favorite teams from wherever they're from or what have you. And plus, just in general, kids these days, I don't think they care about. They don't follow sports the same way that we did, where it was like by team. Now it's more about the individual. And also, a lot of these teams have stunk, as we know, for many years, the Commanders included. So it's not the same deal. So I don't know if the Athletic will view it as, hey, there's this huge opportunity. Now, obviously, all these people, I know many of them who've canceled their subscriptions, or I've seen people just say, hey, I would have paid more money to keep the Post going. Uh, you know, as I said, I'm a subscriber. Or I've been a subscriber. I still am at this moment. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if that's the case by the end of the week. But we're here to do what we can to cover this team. And I've never tried to cover the Commanders the same way that the Post did. My basic strategy for all the years I've been doing this is outside of like a game or just breaking news. If I'm writing the same thing as the Post, it is a loss for me because everybody's going to go to the Post. The Post is going to get the headlines and the attention. They're going to be the ones that most people will probably like aggregate. Not that aggregating is great, but I'm just saying like the Post gets the attention. Where does that attention go now? I mean, there are some of us who are still covering the Commanders beat, but forget the Post even. Like there were so many other outlets that just no longer either exist or no longer send people out there to cover this team. The Associated Press is only out there somewhat. The Washington Times staff is down to 1.5 people. On behalf is basically Tom Lavero as a columnist. Um, many of the other outlets that were around, like just either don't exist or have fallen off or have gotten rid of sports or whatever. So I don't know what's going to happen here now. All I can tell you is that obviously, I've started now this site since July, right? Right before it started training camp, and it was a really interesting first year. The team stunk, but in terms of doing this, trying to build this community, so many of you here were helpful and supportive of me before I knew what I was going to do, and have been since. And all I can say is like I think I've done a pretty good job of having a voice and being part of this. And obviously, there's the breaking news elements that we've had with the Brian Robinson situation. I'm going to have the Cliff Kingsbury situation uh, as well. And there's been others as well. And then, of course, there's just the insight into what's going on with the team and the locker room and why certain things are happening. And now, of course, we've got free agency and the draft coming up, and everybody I think kind of knows that's often where I like to spend my time. So we'll have a lot to get to here on that. But man, I like to think I ask good questions in the press conferences at times. Sometimes I'm like, I got nothing. There's just some weeks where it's just whatever it is. I just don't have like a great feel for what to make of this, and that's fine. You can't always every day have some Pulitzer Prize winning idea to ask a question. But even if I did, other people have other angles that they come with. I thought Tom Shad distinguished himself this year with a lot of good questions that he was asking in his relatively short amount of time. It wasn't just the two beat reporters, of course. The Post would often send out columnists. Barry Verluga was out there a bunch this year. Many others have been there over the years, and we would just have fewer people around. I mean, Chick Hernandez is in here talking a little bit. Hey, Chick. Chick is no longer on the beat itself, and Chick, of course, is another person who's been here for many, many years and provided that perspective. Grew up here as well, so it is a very weird time to be in local media, to be in the media in general, to be in journalism. But I know some people have said to me, "Hey, this is an opportunity. This is, it's horrible for sports and horrible for everybody." But, you know, is it, maybe this is good for you. Again, where's everybody going to go? Look, I obviously hope that I continue to build this subscriber base here, independent of everything else that's going on. But now this should be one of the places where people go to get their Commanders news. And like I said, this situation with the Post is probably going to push me over the finish line to start this Wizards podcast that I've teased about for a little bit, but I still got to work out the mechanics of that. But again, to have fewer voices in the room, to have fewer professional reporters there asking the questions that need to be asked is not going to be fun. Now, who knows? Maybe the Washington Post people that got let go will join together and form some sort of new website. Who knows? Or maybe somebody else who's got deep pockets comes in, sees what's going on. The Baltimore Banner, of course, right? They became a presence in Baltimore, um, including covering sports. They now opened up a Montgomery County version, which I subscribe to as a Montgomery County guy. And I don't know. I kind of thought that the Banner might go into Montgomery County, which is obviously in Maryland, but not near Baltimore. The wealthy county, we get that, but maybe it was like a sign, a step towards, could you get right to the border of DC and maybe see about going into DC? Who knows? Can't say. There's an opportunity for somebody, for sure. I even saw Mark Ein, who, of course, one of the minority owners. He was on social media today. I believe he owns the city paper, and I saw him. Somebody saying to him, "Hey, come on, help us out here." And he says he's on it. Essentially, I don't know what that means. It would be super weird, of course, if somebody who owns the team were to own a paper and have reporters covering the team, but that was potentially going to happen if Jeff Bezos had actually bought this team. So there's that. Who knows what would happen, right? If Bezos buys this team instead of Josh Harris, does everything we just is the Post still closing the sports section or doing anything it's doing right now? I don't know. You would think that you'd want to have coverage of the team, but which is, it's free advertising is a lot of what sports media is, regardless of who you are, what outlet you are. You think you probably want to keep up with bad. Free advertising is a good thing. So yeah, it's an unsettling time. There were a lot of reasons when I had to figure out what I was going to do with my situation when my time was over with the athletic. That I had conversations with people at different places, and I had people at the post encourage me to apply because at that point one of their positions was opening. Obviously, both of them changed, and ultimately I didn't do it because I just didn't know what was going on over there, and also, again, whatever, all that went down with me and the athletic, it was nothing that dramatic, just to be clear. But whatever happened that led to them deciding they wanted to move on from me and me kind of getting over it kind of quickly. I think a lot of it was like, hey, you know what? I get to now run my own show, and the support I got from so many of you when it was announced that they weren't going to renew my contract helped me get to this point. So this is the long way of saying I don't know what's about to happen, but I hope to continue to be a part of this scene. And you guys can get the word out to say, hey, I know you guys read the post. There's other outlets here. Ben Standig's done a lot of good work for a lot of years now. A lot of mock drafts. People like break some news, have good insight, and might even be starting a Wizards pod. Who knows? And by the way, while the Last Man Standing podcast is separate from the site, it all connects because the support I have here allows me to do that, and it, that's a good outlet. And who knows what happens down the line? Maybe eventually all of these things come under one umbrella, but the podcast is already outside of Substack, and so I just left it there. And but all these things connect, and sometimes I put the links in. Maybe I should do it more. One of the headings at the top of the website is for the podcast, but if you don't listen to it on the regular, I would say subscribe. Subscribing helps me a lot, even if you don't listen. But you can listen there and sort of supplement what it is that's happening here on the site. In fact, with the mock draft the other day, I did the full mock draft first round here on the Substack, but I discussed the first 10 picks or so on the podcast with my guy Denton Day from Sirius XM and Team 980. And so that's a way to sort of have the best of both worlds, more fleshed out conversation, but also with the written work as well. And that's how these things kind of work for me at this stage. And, we'll see what happens here going forward. Just a couple quick things here on the Commander, since this is what we discussed. Um, Literally, as I was wrapping up part two of the episode, came news that the Commanders were hiring uh, Eric Henderson, USC's co-defensive coordinator, to come in here as Washington's defensive line coach and run game coordinator. Henderson had those jobs with the Rams during the Aaron Donald eras before he went to USC. And I can give you the statistics that show that USC's points allowed per game was like around 34 before Henderson got there and dropped down to 23 this past year. There was other positive signs. What's interesting, of course, is that we knew, reported that they were looking to bolster their pass rush coaching, that they wanted to bring in somebody that could help more with that. And that didn't seem to be good news for Ryan Kerrigan, who was, of course, listed as the pass game, or sorry, the pass rush coordinator, essentially specialist. Ryan Kerrigan was, of course, let go the other day, along with assistant defensive line coach Daryl Tapp. Well, now the defensive line, sorry, let me rephrase that. Assistant defensive line coach Sharif Floyd was let go. Daryl Tapp, who was the defensive line coach the last 2 years, he's now being reassigned to the assistant role. A little bit unusual to, yes, you'd have to call it a demotion, right? But that's what's happening for now, at least, as far as I know. That's what we were told. So, um, I don't know though of a connection between Henderson and Durante Jones. At this point, whatever hires have been made, they do not seem to be with the idea of Durante Jones bringing in some of his own people to uh, to help him. you know, help with the transition, help him spread the gospel of what he's trying to say, the message he's trying to get out to the players, to the other coaches. Maybe that will still come. They have not replaced Jason Simmons as the passing game coordinator for the defense. So maybe that role goes to somebody that Jones knows. But anyway, so a new defensive line run game coordinator coach in Eric Henderson, with Daryl Tapp staying on, but moving now to the assistant defensive line coach. Speaking of defensive coordinators, Joe Witt Jr. today latched on with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's going to be their defensive backs coach and assistant head coach. He worked under new Steelers coach Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. He is the second coordinator or second coach from here to go to Pittsburgh. Jason Simmons also had worked previously with McCarthy, and he went there as well. So those are a couple of changes. I'm glad to see those guys, have new homes. You don't want to see anybody out of work, as we're talking about the Washington Post situation today. So that's what's going on there. By the way, also the Eagles, their offensive line coach Jeff Stoutland, who is, I don't know if he's the best O line coach in the league, but maybe he's certainly heralded. And the Eagles' offensive line, as we know, has really been the key for them in this stretch where they've won two Super Bowls and went to a third in recent years. He's out as their O-line coach. It sounds like he's maybe staying with the organization, perhaps, but he's no longer be the O-line coach. Kind of odd. I don't know what's going on there. Obviously, the Eagles have had a very curious offseason, which relates to the fact that they had another one of those end of seasons that just fell apart. So, it's not too rosy up there at the moment with Philly. It doesn't necessarily compare here because they still made the playoff. They were the first NFC East team to win back-to-back division titles in over 20 years. But, Washington isn't the only place making changes. Their new offensive coordinator, just like David Blau, was also only 2 years removed from being a quarterback in the league. Their guy, Sean Mannion, was the QB coach last year in Green Bay, so they put a little bit of a leg up on Blau. Of course, they also have a head coach who is an offensive coordinator. So in the worst case scenario, if Mannion doesn't work out, you go back to Sirianni. It's not the case here with Washington, where Dan Quinn is a defensive guy. So hopefully that doesn't happen. It's not an issue. You still have Brian Johnson here and Anthony Lynn. I still would like to think they would bring in another experienced voice to help Blau, somebody who's been a coordinator in the past. But we'll see about that. That'll be another discussion in a podcast, or maybe if that actually happens, more in the podcast. Speaking of the podcast, if you missed it earlier this week, I talked to Ross Tucker, of course, NFL analyst, former offensive lineman from many teams, including this one. I got his view on, as a former offensive player, what is David Blau walking into here? We focus on like the play calling, but it's not just that. You're the organizer of that. You're the leader essentially of that side of the ball. What does that mean? What did Ross think of that? And of course, we also just got his view on this team as a whole. And then, as I said in the Monday episode, Mock Draft Monday, I did a breakdown of a good chunk of the first round mock draft that I posted on the site. And if you missed all that, be sure to go back and listen again. And today, two-parter. Just for those of you who maybe just got here a little bit late, of course, this video will be up on the site. Part one today, myself and Logan Paulson kind of going through the coordinator changes, what this all means, both for the schemes and for certain players, maybe even for those things. And then also the Anthony Davis trade. Myself and my guy Adam Rubin discussed at length what's going on here. Again, giving it a thumbs up. Don't worry about the draft picks. I'm telling you, this looks like a good trade as it stands today. I'm a process over results guy. Good process. And then part two, myself and two former posties, Gene Wong and Jerry Brewer, discussed what happened over there. Those guys, of course, Gene worked there for 37 years, Jerry for about a decade before he left recently, and got their view of what it was like to work there, what happened, where things went wrong, and what does it mean now for DC sports coverage, which is obviously going to be a lot. And also, I got into some Commanders notes as well. All right, so I just wanted to come on here. I feel like I don't want to ignore you guys. I didn't write today because it was so much news, but I did talk about this team a lot, and I just want to let you guys know that it's there. I'm not leaving you guys abandoned today. So check out the podcast, and we'll have more here coming up on the website. I will get the fingers typing again and get some things up on the site soon. All right. I hope everybody's doing well. Otherwise, it's still cold out here. Boo hiss on that. Going to be that way for a bit. I don't know what to tell you. All right. So hopefully I didn't. Oh, let me see. Did I miss any questions here? Even appreciate the discussion of the post and the Wizards. Ben Standig is even more important to subscribe to now. Stephen, your words have never been spoken. I appreciate that. Okay, so I don't know if I see the question, which is totally fine and reasonable. Like I said, I just wanted to come and at least speak up because it was a nutty day. He's a fan, not so much about the Commanders, but you're a DC sports fan, you probably care a lot more than just the Commanders, and the post sports action going away is baffling. All right, I'm here for you though. We'll keep doing this, and more to come. Good luck. I haven't figured out if I'm going to do. Maybe I'll show up on Super Bowl Sunday. Maybe we can do a little live chat again and see if things have calmed down a little bit. If the Commanders made any other moves, or just talk about football and the game itself. All right, I'm going to call it there. You guys rock. Let's keep doing this. Tell your friends I'm here for them. Well, see you guys. Appreciate it.